Okay, hello everyone. Don here. Welcome to Tribe Talk. Tribe Talk is a dialogue for rider coaches to enhance communications and help development and improvement of our culture by sharing experiences and ideas for improvement from the tribe. That's all of you. The tribe is a group of like-minded people who have more in common than they have different. And so that's why it's important that we gather and have these discussions. I hope your curiosity brought you to the tribe, and I hope you're motivated to make some improvements. A disclaimer up front, this is an independent event and truly not sponsored by any one organization or person, regardless of who participates. The one simple motive here is the improvement of our ability to create responsible thinking motorcyclists, hopefully with good judgment. And as a part of that, is also to make a model of rider coaches with similar and more in-depth competencies and abilities than we ask of our students. So I'd like to begin by starting with some video teleconferencing etiquette for those who aren't used to it, or just a reminder for those who are. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking to alleviate any noise and distractions so that everybody else can hear what's going on. Participants are encouraged to get in and participate in the conversation, throw out your ideas, see if they stick, and don't be afraid to say something that's a little bit odd or different so we can all discuss it and have a great dialogue. What I do ask is that you use the hand icon to wave into the conversation so that we don't speak over each other. When you're recognized for speaking the first time, please let us know who you are and where you're from. That way everybody knows who's talking, because it seems like we have a pretty large group tonight. Understand that it's okay to disagree a little bit, but be open-minded to the dialogue and the conversation when you disagree. Remember, high challenge, low threat. Lastly, technology does have some drawbacks, and this is a pretty large group tonight, and I assume that people will bounce in and out if they have technical difficulties. So if you do have those difficulties, don't be afraid to reboot and jump back in. Two topics that we'll be discussing tonight, and I just wanted to kind of give an overlay here. The first one will be professional development of rider coaches. The second one will be experience and inclusion. As a topic with a few statements to kind of just open it up for discussion, and everybody then can jump in. Education, and specifically rider education, is hopefully an experience filled with discovery. And I use that word for a purpose. Many of us talk about those aha moments that students have as a primary factor for why we're involved. Those epiphanies or those aha moments usually result from being exposed to something new and being asked to make meaning or connections on a task or action. So my question is, what would happen if we asked each other better questions to help each other out with the same care that we give to our students? So looking through those lenses, and of course the Rider Coach Guide and the things that we have, what must rider coaches do to be able to do that for students? And what must rider coaches be able to do that for us together as a tribe? Perhaps the roadmap that's in the Rider Coach Guide for how to deal with students is also a way for us to deal with each other. So first question for the dialogue today is, how do we motivate each other to improve and make the tribe better? And with that, I'll open it up to anybody's comments. Well, I guess that's not working very well. Would anybody like to say something about what I just discussed?
Maybe we can discuss what's lacking now.
Good input.
I think one way to motivate each other to improve is to seek improvement ourselves. You know, if we don't show an interest in getting better, why would anybody else want to?
A reaction that I get from the coaches that I work with frequently is, what more do they need to know? That the course isn't changing, so why do they need to develop any further?
Who just said that, please?
Oh, sorry, Mark Weiss, Arizona.
Thank you, Mark.
Hey, Don Allen here. You know, to piggyback on all that, everybody's motivated by somewhat different things. You know, we're a similar group of people, but all have different personalities, different desires. So it's kind of hard to say one thing can motivate everybody, but you know, the desire to improve, which I think is you know, lacking by a lot of them. You know, a lot of them just want to get the job done, and they think they're doing it good enough. So it's that desire to get to the next level, and how do you convince people that it's worth it to get to that next level, that they could actually do a better job and help improve the outcome of the students.
Motivation is a really good aspect that, and I'm glad you brought that up, Alan. What is motivation?
You got really garbled there at the end, Don. I have no idea what you said.
What is the motivation for somebody to improve?
Maybe student success, building upon our failures, trying to get more involved. And there's a bunch of reasons why people want to get better, one would hope.
I think also, and this is Lynn from New York, I think that, you know, giving coaches acknowledgement when they do something that's good or awesome, or, you know, they have a breakthrough, you know, to acknowledge that and give them props for it and say, gee, I thought it was really great the way you did X, Y, or Z. And that opens the way for a discussion where they're put on a positive mindset, you know, instead of a, you know, gee, when you did that, it was wrong, or you were in the wrong place, or saying the wrong thing, to try and build on the good stuff.
We have a lot of new people in here tonight. If you're new and you'd like to jump in and provide a comment, please do.
Sure.
Well, Sarah Kretschmar here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Sarah, go ahead.
Well, for me, when I look at motivation, it's personal. And I say to myself, what did I learn in that class? And if I didn't learn something from the class, I feel like I didn't do my job properly, because how could I not learn something from all these new people doing this new thing for the first time? So I don't know, I look at myself for the motivation of what did I learn today from all of them. So.
Hello, Laura Holland here, aka Black Girl from Minneapolis, Minnesota. to kind of build on what the last couple comments have been, I completely agree with that. And I think that I go through my work as a rider coach just with the premise that I don't necessarily have every answer, and I am not the prime source of all things. I believe that I will learn something from everyone, whether it be a student or another rider coach or anybody else. And so I think that's part of my motivation, but I guess that what I'm looking for is ways to make others feel comfortable approaching things in that same way, feel comfortable enough to believe that you don't have the absolute answer to everything and that you are open to learn always.
I think that was a very poignant comment. What was your first name again? I'm sorry, I don't want to call you Splat Girl. It just seems too much fun.
It's me, Laura Holland from Minnesota.
All right, thank you, Laura. So how do we make it more meaningful for each other to talk to each other and give each other support?
The comment was made before mine about giving praise and, you know, telling people, hey, good job, or that whatever they had to contribute affected me or us. And for me, that's the first way to make sure that people are acknowledged when they have something to contribute, you know, and maybe it's not like the most genius thing in the whole world, but the fact that they felt safe enough and comfortable enough to offer something at all, I think, you know, is deserving of hey, thanks for that. And you know, I think as rider coaches, we all already do that automatically.
Okay, given that part of the equation, how do we address people who don't maybe follow the rules or do things that are what we think may be correct? How do we approach them in a way that we can talk about those kind of things?
I find it's really easy to address a situation by using student outcome as a motivating factor. If students don't do well, and it's because the rider coach's either demeanor or way he's doing or she's doing something, it's easier to just discuss that as a point.
And this is Alan. To build on what Matt just said, you know, we look a lot, and I got to take a slice of the quality assurance training world, at what motivates the site, what motivates the rider coaches, how does the site administrator manage that site, who are the key people at that site that motivate the rest of the group, because there's always key people. And if you could motivate them, motivate the site administrator or the site manager to help drive change at the site, to help motivate the site, then that might be a way in, potentially.
So as Alan was saying, in New York, we try to have a mentor for each site to develop the rider coaches as a whole, to bring them up to a level where they can all be happy without having issues with either the curriculum or personalities.
I'm going to pull out the Ray card. Ray, what do you have to say about the topic that may be helpful?
Probably not much, but great topic. I'm not sure there's a solution. Over the years, as an experienced teacher, I've found in the culture we're in anyway, probably testing is about the only way to do it. That's why I like to start off RRETs, start off workshops with a brief quiz of some kind, just to not necessarily to provide a lot of humility, but to get the creative juices flowing and let people self-assess on where they are. They're there to begin with at the events I do. The problem is MSF has a requirement that, it's 4 classes in 2 years, and we keep pushing down kicking the can down the road as far as putting online tests on there for recertification, but I hope we can go there fairly soon. So I guess when I heard about motivation, I went to tactics. I think we know the philosophy behind motivation about individuals. It's about like someone getting a license. Why do I need more? I got my license. For rider coach, the typical mantra is, I've got my certificate. Why do I need to do more? I'm teaching my 4 classes and I'm doing what's needed, and they're not motivated any further. So the idea is there's got to be some kind of stimulus, some kind of impetus. MSF has not had the wherewithal to do that to date. We're hoping to expand our IT a little bit more and get more into online learning, but that's a slow process. So I think doing events like this is helpful. How do we drill down a little bit further? So that's one comment I had. Another one, I'd like to hear any comments people might have on the 4 levels. Is that adding to the opportunity what we're talking about to motivate, to self-assess, or is that too much labeling and a detriment to what we're trying to accomplish? For example, in the forum, we have a few hundred people participate as observers and probably 3 dozen that ever post. So that's kind of a marker for our culture. So how do we make sure, those people, those 500 are probably learning by not posting. You don't have to post to learn, but at least they're staying engaged. And I think it'd behoove us to try to find a way to get people more engaged if they're not doing it from their own side. It's got to come, I guess, from the MSF perspective. I think too, I thought a few things about, we talk about rider coach trainers or rider coaches, because I think the first line of offense with this would be to get rider coach trainers somehow on a path toward motivation that's almost forced. I'm making a play here that's saying this is kind of a forced issue because it's as good as it's going to get. There's so much stuff on our website. If people were really motivated, they could find it. Look what Don's done, for example, on just his involvement in the past few years and what it's led to. That's something we should probably look at a little bit more detailed. And I think overall, what I'd like to try to do, and I try to do it all the time, I think MSF does, is try to make this about something greater than ourselves. Try to make it about, it's more than just getting people their license or teaching them to ride a motorcycle. And I have a difficult time communicating that. Maybe you can help me out on that, how you get that point across where the motivation comes from an earnest desire to get beyond the status quo, about where we are right now. I certainly like the mentorship idea. That enough comment?
Greatly appreciated, Ray. But you do bring up a point that I want to ask everybody about before we move on to the next topic. And that would be, is the minimum appropriate, or should we raise it or lower it for what we ask of rider coaches coming in? Do we need to expect more from people as we invite them into the tribe? Would that be helpful or hurtful?
Mark in Arizona. I've got coaches that are working at my site who have 15 and 20 years experience, and they teach 15, 20, even 30 classes a year. And those that are motivated to improve were that way from the very beginning. And I've got others who they say, look, at almost everyone the class passes. I teach a lot of classes. I get great reviews. What more do I need? And they're not driven to achieve anything else when the best their students can do is pass the class and get their license. So I don't know that levels or anything along those lines. I don't know if that will make a difference until they sort of get to see what's possible. Maybe if they get to experience what is there beyond the minimum that they do with their rider coach guide.
All right, good comment, Mark. Would anybody else like to provide their 2 cents or 10 cents, if so be? Okay, if not, we'll go ahead and we'll move on to the second topic of the evening. And it's going to be experience and conclusion. If you give me a second, I'm going to quickly turn over the share to Mr. Matt Gentile. You have the host, Matt.
It's still downloading or whatever it's doing. We're getting there. Give me a minute.
You have it?
It's getting there.
All right. Should be able to share the screen.
Yep, I'm working on it now. A little slow.
That's all right. We got time. There we go.
You got it?
Yep.
Does everybody see that? Yes? A head nod would be fine. So I would like to thank everybody for this opportunity. And being we spoke about how to get people involved, I would like a high level of involvement during this experience and conclusion portion. And hopefully we can achieve that. So what is experience and conclusion? Anybody want to chime in? One person?
This thing happened, and here's what I think about it.
So what is it that happened? Is that the experience?
Yes.
And what part of the conclusion? The end?
What did I think about it, or what does that mean?
Okay. How about it's an accelerated learning technique? It's more than just providing an experience and a conclusion. It's more of a learning, adult learning process where a student gets immersed in the content. And most of the stuff that I'm telling or trying to explain to you is from the Rider Coach Guide. So how does it work? Anybody have a thought process on how it works?
Well, in my
Is it
experience,
passive listening?
in my experience, Matt, this is Dave Galen in Nebraska. In my experience, a very effective technique in the classroom. I see people from early teens through their 70s, and when they're having some fun, they're doing the reaction time experience. Generally, when you ask them what they learn about themselves, is they do internalize and personalize what their reaction time might be. So it's generally pretty effective, and as Matt has said, certainly accelerates. What's it take? Maybe 5 minutes for you to learn. An old guy like me, oh man, your reaction time's terrible. And the teenage young woman who's anxious to learn how to ride a motorcycle can beat me every time.
Oh, great. Thank you very much.
You're
So
welcome.
students are engaged in the activities that foster learning and understanding. And we do that in many different ways throughout the curriculum. So what are the benefits? Anybody have an idea what the benefits are?
This is Mike Gentile from Connecticut. So a lot of the benefits come from the experience part. Is a lot of the students who attend the BRC have a lot of knowledge already. So the activity kind of draws them to, the activity helps them to draw out or make some of these personal connections to the material. And once they have this personal connection to the material, that's the aha moment. So they get to a conclusion quicker, and really helps them learn quicker and retain the information a lot longer.
Oh, thank you, Mike.
You got to let your brother step in to help, huh?
I hear that. I can pay him off.
Yeah, but at the same time, you add to that and you say, okay, well, if the students are engaged in the activity, the students are doing the activity, they begin to own what's going on, and that helps foster it even better if the students begin to own their process.
Yeah, they're responsible for their own success.
Oh, there you go. Look at that, right?
And they can actually drag that right into their street riding for situations, right? So how can we be more successful with the process? Anybody?
The key word that I heard in the last comment was helping students create a personal connection to the activity. And I feel like that is the challenge.
What's challenging with connecting them to the activity?
A lot of people are shy and somewhat reluctant to lay themselves open to others around the table in their group. You got to make them comfortable. I think the words in the book talk about a high challenge, low threat environment. You have to make sure that's how they feel.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. I think,
yeah, I think also stepping back, realizing that as a facilitator, once the activity gets started and the students are involved and experience something, to not worry that the activity isn't following an exact template. It's going to go the way the students take it, and being willing to let that happen, and unless it gets so far off track that they're going to completely miss the point. But stepping back and letting the students direct their own activity, they come to a more meaningful conclusion because it's their own rather than something they've been herded towards.
Right on, Mark.
Oh, thanks, Mark. So even though each class dynamic can be different, the process is the same, and the conclusion, does it change?
Not by a lot. Generally, things are pretty well on target. Sometimes there are additions that other classes haven't noted before, but for the most part, when things are set off with enough structure and the students have enough information, they'll follow pretty much on the expected path.
Awesome. Lynn, I see you had a...
I was going to say that's where we can use our use of questions, to steer the conclusion, where we think it ought to go, if they're way off base, or if we can enhance where they're at with some other observations or points, or draw it out of them to give some other reflection or think about it a different way, and maybe expand the conclusion.
Just like is being modeled for us right now.
Awesome. See how that works?
Yeah, and we have to be willing to accept the fact that the students may discover something that we haven't thought of.
Absolutely.
As they do.
They usually do. Awesome. So is it acceptable to state a conclusion? Yes, no, maybe?
I mean, it's acceptable.
Fair
You'd rather
conclusion.
not, but it's acceptable, I suppose, in the end.
Yeah. Rider coaches should facilitate a response to the key points for each experience and/or activity. So is the conclusion usually the key point, depending on the topic, right? Does anyone want to share an example? We have 38 participants. There's got to be somebody.
An example of the students.
Well, pick an activity and describe the experience and the conclusion.
This was several months ago. We were doing the peripheral vision activity, you know, as usual in things, you know, and that's one of the ones that the students somewhat come up with their own way of doing things, and it still goes pretty much according to plan. But on this particular activity, one of the groups finished earlier than the other groups, and they looked over at me and said, "Can we try this with our helmets on?"
That's an interesting thing.
And came to a much more complex set of conclusions than would normally be expected, because they actually put it in the context that they were interested in.
Awesome. I have a question. Were they full face helmets?
We had both.
Oh,
And I asked if they had found a difference, which they had not. They were surprised.
that's great. So they related it to something that they were going to be doing on a daily basis. Well, thanks, Mark. So can experience and conclusion be used on the range? Anybody?
Yes.
I hope it's being used on the range.
Me too.
Is that kind of what our reflection is about?
Yeah, so the experience is a new task or learning or a new ability to ride a motorcycle. And at the end of each exercise, what do we have?
Reflections.
Yeah, and that's when they share their experiences with the group. So what worked for them or not.
Ron from
So the
Rochester.
folk- Hey, Ron.
Hi, Matt, how you doing? And if you carry it through, okay, the experience and conclusion just keeps repeating and repeating. The students reflect on their experience, they share their conclusions, and now they just go to the next step, which is sharing their experience with their conclusion.
Does everybody have the same conclusion after every exercise?
Absolutely not.
So by sharing it through the reflection process, what did they just do?
They've actually helped each other to learn, as well as becoming more understanding of what they just learned.
Awesome. Thanks, Ron. So for experience and conclusion, the focus is not on the expertise of a rider coach, but on the active learning from the students. So what does that mean? Anybody?
That means we have to stop talking and let them experience it.
That's pretty good, Ron. I have a mute button for you.
I think it also means that we have to realize it's not always going to be we're not always going to get the same conclusion, that everyone's going to have their own value, so their focus might be different, or different from ours.
Well, we should share the conclusion as a whole, right? To the ones that's supposed to be done, to the objective of the exercise or the activity sheet. But we can relate the conclusion to their own personal success, or being able to, relate it to car driving. Most all people have their driver's licenses, just to make it more meaningful for them. Okay. Anybody have any questions? There's 38 people with no questions. That's great. Okay, is Don still there?
I am, sir.
Would you like me to stop sharing?
We can do that. I'll reclaim the host.
That's on the way.
Thank you, sir. And just because we can, maybe, since I screwed that up, I have to ask you, Matt, how did it feel to be a person out in front of everybody and trying to get them motivated to participate in the talk?
It wasn't as big as a challenge as I thought.
Okay, so
I had a pretty good segue into the participation part, so that kind of helped a bit. And you know, just like we do with our students, we try to break the ice and get everybody, get everybody to participate some way, shape, or form.
it is. So if we can do it with students,
that also goes.
The point is here, if we can do it with students, why can't we do it with each other? I mean, we're all have different strengths and challenges with the knowledge and learning. But if we start this talk a little bit more, maybe we'll become better as a group, as tribe. And so I'd like to, quickly thank Ray for being in here tonight, and also throw the bonus in from Tribe Talk. Yay! You guys are no fun. All right. So Tribe Talk's bonus, Ask Ray in Training Systems. So I'll kind of turn it over to Dr. Ray, and if anybody has any questions to shoot out there for him, go ahead and take a shot. Now it's starting to sound like IRETs.
Well, if we would have known ahead of time, we would have prepared some stumpers.
See, some never available in front.
You can always email me.
Hey, Ray, can we talk about training numbers and as it relates to traffic accidents? Is that possible?
Sure. You want me to just talk generally about that?
So how many people is there? Sure.
Well, I have my opinion on a couple things related to that. We train approximately 350,000 per year. That's, assuming what I'll call the dark side does training in other states, which is fine. Probably is pushing 400,000 that get formal training every year to get their license. I see no connection to that and crash rates that can be proven. I'd like to think we don't even know how many people ride after that. I mean, there's surveys done, but nothing that definitive, because the numbers are actually kind of small compared to the driving population. So it's real difficult to make that connection to training making a difference, if that's the direction your question's taking, on trying to tie training numbers to crashing or to accident stats or crash stats, whatever you want to call it. Is that the thrust of the question?
Yeah, I'm just interested to see if we're actually saving lives.
Well, that's the magic question. I didn't get the middle part of what you were saying, but yeah, that's the magic question.
That maybe.
Yeah, the magic question is, are we saving lives? And that's never going to be answered definitively. I don't think there's no model of research that can actually get to that point. We have to believe in it. But to get at the point of a couple of these topics you've had today, that's the whole point of having a rider coach be able to go beyond what the minimum is. Because the belief that MSF has, at least I do, is that the deeper you can go with content, understanding, and reflection, the more payoff there's going to be. The problem is you can't prove that. But that's better than just giving the minimum and just going through simple skills training and hoping for great results. Is the question answered?
Yes, sufficiently. Thank you.
So I have a question for everybody then, unless there's another one coming on down the pike here.
Well, this is Al, I was gonna throw at you to see if you're able to talk about future curriculum changes, or is that not something you want to discuss yet?
No, can't do that yet.
Okay, I'll say what.
Okay.
All right, I have one for you. years ago, MSF did some follow-up studies with students and to find out what happened to them after they took the class. And I recall something being mentioned that there were some maybe surprising results from talk near the snack bar or whatever, that listening to students saying things like, I realized if I could learn how to ride, then I could go back to school and get a degree, or I could kick the bum out of my house, or I could do all these other things just by the sheer fact that they were able to accomplish learning how to ride. Can you speak more on that? Because I'm going by a vague memory.
My guess is you're referring to the Discovery Project that Dr. Sherry Williams was involved with and Mark Wing was involved with up at our Long Beach site when we had that site. Those were some of the questions that were asked. There wasn't enough to gain any definitive answer to that. But one thing that happened, like it does in most longitudinal studies, that is a study over time, is participation started to wane. People quit coming back. The incentive wasn't enough. They sold their motorcycle. They weren't going to ride anymore after they got their licenses, things like that. So that the final results of that study were never released because there wasn't anything definitive at the very end. The trend was, though, that safety renewal worked, because that was the theme of that whole study. And they captured some anecdotal information from student comments related to what you're saying. I've never seen that list. I haven't, since it was never released. I don't know what some of those are. I think probably Sherry mentioned that. My guess is she mentioned some of those things when she made a presentation somewhere, which is interesting, fascinating stuff to see what the students really take away from what we do. But I have nothing really I can add to that other than what MSF tries to do. It assumes states might look into more detailed statistics related to what's going on in their training. Because we don't capture student data. We capture numbers. We know how many rider handbooks are sold, but we don't get into the specific research related to that because it's been done for many decades now, and there's no definitive results. One study will say one thing, one will say another, and the methodology is always questioned. Again, going back to why we have to believe in what we do and make everybody the best he or she or it can be.
You know, and when we're asking about statistics for motorcycle fatalities, motorcycle crashes, we should also consider that it's likely we are keeping people from having car crashes and fatalities that they may have had they not taken our class, because we hear comments all the time from students saying, wow, I feel like I'm a better car driver now because of this class. Of course, those again are statistics that are very difficult to capture.
Yeah, I wish we could capture that. You might remember probably 20 years ago now, MSF started to establish a follow-up communication to everybody who completed a course with a participation booklet of some kind of like a tips book. And the funding ran out of that really quick because, again, and you didn't know if it was going to fall on deaf ears or not. We're always looking for ways to try to expand that via our website primarily, but I can't, we don't really, we count the numbers that do web hits, but we don't know what the effect is after that. Again, it's just that I believe something positive is happening. So many of you probably went to an IRETS or RRETS or do the quality assurance specialist training. One thing we started doing there's a 150 item quiz, a traffic safety type quiz. Can anybody comment on the value of that in self-assessing or motivating based on what our first topic was? Because I mentioned testing is one way to get people to, wake up, pay attention, and sometimes we're speaking to the choir too much. But any comments on that test? Is it a valuable addition to an activity, or is it just kind of fluff?
Dr. Ray, I've actually been sending it out via email, about 10 questions at a time, in a weekly staff meeting, and there have been some interesting results from that. People are like, "Oh, what's a crossbuck?" or "Oh, what's a this?" or "Oh, what's a that?" And I simply answer that they need to go to RetSorg and get the vocabulary. And that usually gets them not necessarily motivated, but it directs them to get to RETSorg and try to find out a few things by themselves.
Yeah, it's been disappointing. A lot of people haven't gone to see that, what we're calling a lexicon now. We trended down somewhat. Thought maybe it might be more palatable to folks. In fact, we had an experience a few months ago where somebody thought we used that test as an I got you moment to check people out to see if they actually were reading what's on the website. That wasn't the intent, but it's interesting how some people take what you try to accomplish. I see Lynn had something she wanted to say.
No, I'm just flipping. I don't remember taking that test, so I'm going to have to go and look for that.
Yeah, Lynn, you did not take the test. It's quite humbling, actually.
Huh.
I was going to say, I just got a chance to take it recently. And really, I ended up doing some research on some of the things that I actually learned a lot just by going through it. I'm like, wow, I thought I knew almost any test that could be thrown at me. And it was good, though. Some of the research was really worthwhile. And I do think it does make you better by looking up stuff that maybe you didn't know so well.
Well, that's appreciated. I wish everybody was that motivated. So way to go.
Can I ask where you find this test at?
Well, I've used it at regional rider education training workshops, and we use it in the quality assurance certification training. It's not something that we really wanted to push out globally because that's what will happen. People will have the answers and it'll minimize the effect once somebody might take a formal program related to that. I have offered to provide the test and answers to anybody who emails me, and I certainly will do that to anybody in the group if they want to do that. But yeah, we're kind of torn between throwing stuff out there and people get the answers and understanding of it, and then we go out and do training. Well, I already know that. And that's the problem with preaching to the choir oftentimes is people come in really with a good depth of knowledge, and a lot of the rider coaches that might attend something like that never even visit the website, let alone, it's an assumption I'm making. They probably visit the website, but not the extent we'd like for them to. And it throws a mismatch out there. So training systems is always looking for a way to try to target the audience in a specific way to get a specific result and not blanket everything. If we're going to blanket everything, we say, go to the website. But I don't think but 3 people out of the several hundred we've done the quality assurance certification course, special certification course, have known the lexicon was there. And the word's getting out about that now. I think that's a good thing. And then we'll have to change up to a different test maybe later on. And you know how much I don't like to work, so bring it on.
Perhaps this forum is a good way, now that everybody has an understanding that it's out there. Who do you have that you work with that you can bring them together and put this information out and maybe grow the ability for people to find it and then take the test and learn something? Once again, the whole reason why we're getting together as a group. Any thoughts on that?
I guess that I would say that I'm looking at ways to be able to maintain contact with our coach group just here in Minnesota. And if there are ways or ideas that people have, this being one of them, for how I can communicate with them in a way that is productive and facilitates their learning and them being better coaches, then to me, that's a worthwhile group discussion. And I think this particular thing and the lexicon, which I knew about, but I think it's very true that probably people aren't aware of that. That's a thing that I can now send out to coaches and say, hey, you should check this out. And if there's another piece that I can add on to that, I think that's great. But of course, there will be many other things that I would love to hear other people's ideas about too, for how to just kind of maintain, some kind of sense of community with our coaches here in our individual programs I'm looking at being shut down for 2 months here in Minnesota, probably. So minimum.
Hey, Ray, can I make a suggestion in regards to that test?
If it's a good one.
Well, I think it's a good one, otherwise I wouldn't be speaking up.
Of course you can.
So when you send out the test, can you send out the answers upon special request or a few days later? So people don't get the questions and the answers in the same
You
email?
mean for people that request it in this group?
Yeah, sure.
I like that idea.
This way maybe they can share the same aha moment that I got when I received.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I'll probably need a reminder to do it though. So. But it goes back to what the first topic was. I tried to, in answering a couple things about maybe a test will motivate people, and it usually does, at least as a self-assessment. MSF can't go beyond the basic standards we've got for recertification, but maybe we can beef those up some. In some meetings we've had lately with administrators, they would really like us to put a little more pressure on rider coach trainers and try to beef up the requirements to get recertified in that. And that's something we'll probably be looking at, but I thought I'd throw that out there just because it's not necessarily all about rider coaches, but rider coach trainers too. And maybe there's some way we can come up with ideas to force the issue. Now, when I'm saying force the issue, I mean force the issue to find out that, the more I know, the better it does get. The more I know, the better my student outcomes are. The more I know, the better I can do what Mark Weiss suggested, which was I can let the conversation open up and I'm not afraid of where it goes because I can handle it. And I like to have rider coaches willing and able to do that and not just say, well, I just want to deliver the course and that's good enough. But maybe our culture doesn't accept it. It's a constant tension we're always looking at. And then because we're getting near the end here, let me just comment on the second topic. Experience conclusion, that we didn't have that originally in the guide. We put that in there after pilot testing the certification process for the BRC updated and using level 2, because we found out a lot of rider coaches could not, they didn't want to get the depth of understanding and go that uncertain way. So at least at the minimum for what I'll term a level 1 rider coach is experience conclusion. Just give them the conclusion, at least we can go that far and ensure that gets across. So that's where experience conclusion came from in terms of the rider coach guide in level 2. I much like experience and reflection, which some of you have already brought up. I think that's a lot better approach, and we can do that on the range. I'm really glad to hear that was brought up. But I'm not sure how many rider coaches can step back and be comfortable doing that. So I'll be quiet now and let Don wrap up.
As always, we appreciate your input, Ray.
I don't know, a couple people dropped off while I was talking, so maybe I ran them off.
Don't take it personal. I yelled at him or something.
Everything I take. All right, go ahead.
Hey, Don, before you jump in word, there's, I think was it Ralph posted the knowledge test, that Rider K test in the chat session, if people want to grab it and download it. If you weren't going to say that already. If I stole your thunder, sorry.
The less I talk, the better. So I saw that a lot of you had come out and looked at the link before, and I left it open because I thought it would be a good idea for people to have the opportunity to play around with stuff, especially on this Zoom being new technology. One of the things that we did this week was we had a happy hour on Wednesday evening for those who wanted to just play around and talk, and it actually turned into some good discussion and was also the impetus for coming this direction with the topics for this Sunday. So the last thing that I'll leave you with, for what it's worth, is that I hope you continue the dialogue and continue to participate. And the best way you can do that when we're not on here is to go to the website and give us feedback and ideas. They're anonymous, by the way, for what to talk about in the future. And if we still have this many people participating 2 months from now, I'll continue it and I'll put myself out there and continue to organize it because I think there's value in hearing from you all. I learned so much that I had to get back in the Rider Coach Guide this week and I've highlighted completely different sections that I've ever paid attention to before. So with that spirit, I want to say thank you for being a part of the tribe and challenging us to be better. And I ask that you bring more people in. And if there's any way I can help for you to start something like this with your rider coaching, shoot me a line. I've been texting and phone calling people all week based on last week's conversations and continue to grow because of it. I hope that you have the same experiences that I have and draw the same conclusion that we do learn more and we are better for talking to each other and communicating. So barring any last minute comments, and I'll leave it open for a little while if you all want to talk, that's all I have for this week and Tribe Talk.